Is she mine? 13 days. She's been alive for 13 days and you didn't tell me.
She wasn't expecting him. The billionaire stormed into her house in anger, then froze when he saw the newborn in her arms. Thank you for choosing this story today. If it moves you, please share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances and the power of protecting what matters most. The mahogany door to the harbor's rest apartment exploded open with such force that the brass hinges groaned in protest. Connor Drake stood in the doorway, 6 feet 4 inches of controlled fury, wrapped in a $10,000 suit, his jaw clenched so tight that the muscles in his neck stood out like cords. Rain from the autumn storm dripped from his dark hair onto the worn hardwood floor, each drop marking time like a countdown to confrontation. Victoria. Her name came out sharp enough to cut glass. We need to talk about the lies you've been spreading, the rumors, the accusations about our relationship being some kind of arrangement. But then he saw her. Not Victoria Rhodes, the woman who'd vanished from his life 7 months ago without explanation, leaving him with nothing but unanswered calls and a gnawing emptiness he refused to acknowledge. No, what stopped him cold, what drained every ounce of righteous anger from his body in the space of a heartbeat, was the tiny bundle in her arms. A baby so small she seemed more of a suggestion than substance, wrapped in pale pink cotton that made her skin look impossibly delicate. The anger drained from his face so fast it left him physically dizzy. His briefcase slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud that neither of them acknowledged. His next words came out strangled, barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality before him. Is she mine? Victoria lifted her chin, those green eyes that had haunted his dreams for 7 months meeting him without flinching. Her voice was steady, though her arms tightened protectively around the infant in a gesture so primal it made his chest ache. Yes. 1 word. 3 letters. An entire universe shifting on its axis. Connor's knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the doorframe, his knuckles white against the dark wood, his entire world rewriting itself in real time. 13 days. The baby couldn't be more than 13 days old based on her size, the newborn fragility still evident in every feature. 13 days of her existence that he'd known nothing about. 13 days, he said, and it wasn't a question. The calculation was automatic, devastating. She's been alive for 13 days and you didn't tell me. You didn't call. You didn't... His voice cracked. The billionaire who'd stared down hostile takeovers and made grown executives cry in boardrooms couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't, Victoria said softly, her voice carrying layers of exhaustion and something darker, fear, perhaps, or resignation. Connor, I wanted to tell you, I tried to tell you, but sometimes later becomes never when the wrong people decide you know too much. The baby stirred against her chest, making a sound so soft it was barely human, more like a kitten's mewl than a cry. Connor's entire focus shifted to that tiny face, those impossibly small fingers curling and uncurling against the blanket, with movements that seemed both random and purposeful. What's her name? Royal... Victoria's voice caught on the name, emotion flickering across her face for the first time. Royal Rhodes. Royal, he repeated, testing the weight of it on his tongue. Then quieter, with an edge of something that might have been hurt. Rhodes. My family name. I couldn't... She paused, choosing her words with visible care. I couldn't use Drake. Not until I knew it was safe. Not until I knew you'd want to be part of this... safe. The word hung between them like a loaded weapon, raising 1,000 questions that Connor's analytical mind immediately began cataloguing. Connor Drake, who had security details and bulletproof cars, who lived behind walls of money and power that most people couldn't even conceive of, was standing in front of a woman who'd hidden his child to keep her safe. From what? From whom? And why hadn't she trusted him to protect them? Can I... He stopped, swallowed hard against the emotion threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained control. This man who commanded boardrooms and controlled billions, who could move markets with a single statement, looked absolutely lost standing in this modest doorway. Would you let me hold her? The vulnerability in his voice made Victoria's eyes sting with tears she refused to let fall. She studied his face, really looked at him for the first time since he'd burst through her door like an avenging angel. Gone was the polished executive mask he wore like armor. This was Connor raw, Connor real, Connor discovering he was a father while rain still dripped from his expensive hair onto her worn floor, creating a puddle that neither of them cared about. "Sit down first," she said gently, nodding toward the cream-colored couch that had seen better days. She's so small, Connor. You have to support her head. Her neck can't hold the weight yet." He moved like he was walking through a dream, each step deliberate and careful, as if the floor might give way beneath him. The couch cushions compressed under his weight, and he positioned himself exactly in the center, his posture rigid with the kind of attention he usually reserved for critical contract negotiations. When Victoria moved closer, they were just inches apart, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with rain and something else, something that was purely him. Close enough that 7 months of distance collapsed into nothing. "Put your arm like this," she demonstrated, creating a cradle with her own arms, her movements practiced from 13 days of constant repetition. She needs to feel secure, completely supported. Newborns don't have the muscle control to stabilize themselves. Connor mirrored her position with intense concentration, and then Victoria was transferring their daughter into his arms. The moment Royal's weight, all 6 pounds 2 ounces of her, according to the pediatrician, settled against his chest, something fundamental changed in Connor Drake's expression. The hard edges that had been carved by years of corporate warfare softened. The perpetual furrow between his brows, present since his father's death when he was 12, smoothed out completely. He looked younger suddenly, amazed, completely and utterly undone. "She's perfect," he breathed, his voice barely audible. Royal's eyes opened, dark blue and unfocused the way all newborns' eyes are, but seeming to search for something nonetheless. When they found his face, when her gaze locked onto his for just a moment, Connor made a sound that might have been a sob if billionaires were allowed to sob. "God, Victoria, she's absolutely perfect. How is something this small even possible?" "She has your nose," Victoria said, settling beside him on the couch, careful to maintain some distance despite the intimacy of the moment. "And I suspect she has your stubbornness. She fights sleep like it's a hostile takeover she refuses to surrender to." He almost smiled at that, a ghost of the expression she remembered from their time together. But then his jaw tightened again, reality crashing back in. "I came here because someone told me you were spreading rumors about us, about what happened between us being some kind of transactional arrangement. They said you were trying to extort money, that you were threatening to go public with lies about our relationship being fabricated for financial gain. Someone wanted you angry," Victoria said quietly, watching Royal's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. "Angry enough not to ask questions. Angry enough not to wonder why I really left 7 months ago. Angry enough not to think clearly about who benefits from keeping us apart. Who would benefit from? The same person who's been slowly poisoning you for the past 9 months. Connor's head snapped up from studying Royal's face, his eyes sharp and suddenly dangerous. "What are you talking about?" "That's why I left, Connor. I found out what was happening, but I knew you'd never believe me. Not without proof. Not when it was someone you've trusted since you were children. And then I realized I was pregnant, and suddenly I wasn't just risking my own life by knowing the truth. I was risking hers." She looked at Royal with such fierce protectiveness that Connor felt it like a physical force. Royal made another small sound, and Connor automatically adjusted his hold, swaying slightly the way he'd seen parents do, the gesture surprisingly instinctive. The movement was so natural, so immediate, that it made Victoria's heart ache with what might have been if circumstances had been different. "Someone's been poisoning me," he repeated flatly, his analytical mind, already running through possibilities and dismissing them just as quickly. That's insane. That's the plot of a bad thriller, not real life. Is it? The headaches that started 9 months ago, the ones that only happen after your morning coffee. The dizzy spells you blamed on work stress and lack of sleep. The way your coffee started tasting bitter, but you assumed it was a new supplier. The unexplained stomach problems that 3 different specialists couldn't diagnose because they were looking for disease, not deliberate contamination. Each word hit him like a physical blow, precisely aimed and devastatingly accurate. He'd mentioned all of those things to her during their time together, late-night confessions in the darkness of his bedroom when his guard was down and he was just a man instead of an empire. How do you know about coffee? I never told you about the taste change because I watched you make it every morning for the 2 weeks I stayed at your penthouse, and I watched someone else add something to it when you weren't looking. Someone who has access to everything in your life. Someone you trust absolutely and without question. Who? The word came out dangerous now, edged with the promise of consequences. He was holding his daughter, and suddenly every threat was magnified 1,000-fold. Every protective instinct he'd never known he possessed roared to life. If I tell you now without proof, you won't believe me. Or worse, you'll confront them, and they'll know I know. And then Royal and I become loose ends that need to be eliminated. So instead, you just disappeared. Left me to think. He stopped himself, but Victoria knew exactly what he'd been about to say. Left me to think you were just another woman who wanted the lifestyle but not the man. Another gold digger. Another person who saw dollar signs instead of a human being. I left you alive, she said simply, the words carrying a weight that made them land like stones. The dose was increasing. I tracked it, Connor. I kept samples, documented everything. Another month, maybe 2 at the rate it was escalating, and it would have looked like a heart attack. Tragic billionaire dies young from the stress of running an empire. No one would have questioned it. No one would have looked deeper. And you have proof of this? Physical evidence? I will. But I needed time. I needed to disappear completely, have the baby safely away from prying eyes, and gather what I needed without anyone knowing I was doing it. Except someone figured out I was pregnant before I left. Someone started spreading those rumors specifically designed to bring you here, angry and unthinking, ready to destroy me before I could tell you the truth. Connor looked down at Royal, who had fallen asleep in his arms with the complete trust that only infants possess, utterly peaceful and unaware of the complex web of danger and deception surrounding her existence. His daughter, his blood, his future in a 6-pound package. Tell me what you need, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos of emotion underneath. Whatever it is, whatever it takes to keep you both safe and stop whoever's doing this, tell me what you need, and I'll make it happen. Drop a comment. What would you name a child to remind them of their worth? And subscribe to Mr. Steel-Rich Stories for more moral-rich tales. I need you to pretend you believe the rumors, Victoria said, her voice firm despite the difficulty of what she was asking. I need you to leave here angry, make a scene maybe. Let them think their plan worked exactly as intended, and then you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you, without questions or modifications. Can you do that? Can you trust me completely, even though I kept your daughter from you for 13 days? Connor Drake, who trusted no one completely, who had built an empire on verification and control, who hadn't relied on anyone else's judgment since his father died and left him alone at 12, looked at the mother of his child and nodded. Yes, even if what I tell you breaks your heart, even if the truth destroys relationships you've had your entire life, yes, even if the person betraying you is the last person you'd ever suspect, the one person you thought would never hurt you. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, but he nodded again. Yes, For her, yes. Victoria stood slowly, gently taking Royal back into her arms. The loss of her weight made Connor's arms feel empty in a way that had nothing to do with physical absence, and everything to do with the sudden void where his daughter had been. "Then start yelling," she said, her voice hard now, preparing for what had to come next. "Call me a liar. Tell me you'll see me in court. Threaten legal action. Make it convincing enough that anyone listening believes you hate me." "Victoria." "They're probably listening, Connor. They have to be if they knew to send you here at exactly this moment. So make it good. Make it brutal. Make it sound like you'll destroy me, and then leave and don't contact me for 3 days." He stood slowly, his height filling the small room again, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people standing on opposite sides of a secret that could destroy everything, parents to a child who deserved better than the mess they'd created. "When will I see you again, both of you?" 3 days. Harbour's Rest Park, the bench on the east side near the old oak tree, the one where we sat and talked for hours on that first real date. 7 in the morning. Come alone, and make absolutely certain you're not followed, and if something happens before then, if you need me, if the Royal needs me, then you'll know you were right to trust me, because I'll find a way to reach you. She shifted Royal to one arm and reached out with her free hand, her fingers barely grazing his cheek in a touch that felt like goodbye and promise simultaneously. "Now start yelling. Make them believe you despise me." What happened next would have convinced anyone listening that Connor Drake and Victoria Rhodes were mortal enemies. His voice rose in volume and venom, accusations flying like weapons designed to wound. He called her a liar, a manipulator, threatened lawsuits and criminal charges. She fired back with equal fury, her voice breaking at precisely calculated moments to sound both defensive and guilty. When he finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the frame shook, the silence that followed felt alive with danger. Victoria stood frozen, Royal pressed against her chest, listening for any sound that might indicate they hadn't been convincing enough. When nothing came, when the apartment remained quiet except for Royal's soft breathing, she finally allowed herself to sink onto the couch. "That was your father," she whispered to her sleeping daughter, "and in 3 days, if we're very lucky and very careful, you'll get to know him properly." Outside, Connor sat in his car for a full 5 minutes before his hands stopped shaking enough to drive. The performance had been necessary, he understood that. But the look in Victoria's eyes when he'd called her a gold-digging liar would haunt him, almost as much as the image of his daughter, Royal Rhodes, named to declare her worth independent of his legacy, sleeping peacefully while danger circled closer. He started the engine and pulled away from the modest building, already counting the hours until he could see them again. 72 hours had never seemed so long. The ballroom glittered with the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over a crowd that collectively controlled more money than some nations' annual budgets. The fundraiser for coastal resilience had drawn everyone who mattered in New York's financial ecosystem, but Connor Drake stood apart from the usual clusters of power brokers, actually reading the information displays about erosion patterns and storm surge data instead of networking. "You're the only person here who spent more than 30 seconds looking at the actual cause," a voice said behind him. He turned to find a woman in an emerald dress that matched her eyes, holding 2 champagne flutes and studying him with undisguised curiosity. Not the practiced interest he usually encountered at these events, something more genuine, more amused. "Victoria Rhodes," she said, offering him one of the glasses. "I designed the reef restoration proposal on panel 3, the biomimetic structure using recycled composite materials." Connor accepted the champagne but didn't drink, too interested in the conversation. "That's brilliant. The cost-to-impact ratio is exceptional. You actually read it. She sounded genuinely surprised. Most people just write checks and take photos for their social media. Most people don't care about solving problems, just about being seen caring. He set down the untouched champagne. Your proposal, it could work, but you're underestimating the maintenance costs in years 3 through 5. Instead of being offended, she laughed. You're right. I was hoping no one would notice until after funding was secured, and then? Then I'd find creative solutions. Maybe partner with local universities for maintenance training programs. Turn a cost center into an educational opportunity. Connor found himself genuinely smiling for the first time all evening. Have dinner with me. Now. No, somewhere real, not. He gestured to the opulent room, this performance. Over the next 3 months, they built something neither had experienced before. A relationship based on conversation instead of transaction. Tuesday nights at Harbour's Rest Diner became sacred. Weekend walks along the pier where Connor quietly funded repairs without ever mentioning it. Late nights in his penthouse where she challenged his assumptions and he actually listened. Why coastal restoration? He asked one night, stealing fries from her plate at their corner booth. Because the ocean doesn't care about your bank account, she said. Rich or poor, when the storm surge comes, we all need the same thing, something solid between us and the water. He fell in love with her somewhere between the 3rd Tuesday and the 10th, though he couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It might have been when she told him his quarterly earnings report was boring and he should read poetry instead. Or when she fixed his tie before a board meeting and told him he was enough, exactly as he was. The end started 6 months into their relationship with Sawℹ Minton's increasing presence. Sawℹ had been Connor's friend since childhood, his father's goddaughter, his most trusted advisor. When his father died, she'd been the one constant in his collapsing world. She'd guided him through Harvard, through his first years running the company, through every crisis, personal and professional. You're spending a lot of time with this Victoria person, Sawℹ mentioned one morning, adjusting his coffee with the familiarity of decades. Is that wise given the upcoming merger? Her name is Victoria, not this Victoria person. And yes, it's wise because she makes me happy. Happiness is temporary. Legacy is permanent, but it wasn't just comments. Victoria started noticing other things. The way Sawℹ touched Connor's shoulder possessively, the way she positioned herself between them at company events, the way she monitored his schedule with increasing control. Then Victoria noticed the coffee. She'd stayed at Connor's penthouse for 2 weeks while her apartment was being fumigated. Every morning, she watched him make coffee in his state-of-the-art kitchen, and every morning, like clockwork, Sawℹ arrived at 7:15. On the 8th morning, Victoria pretended to sleep late but watched from the bedroom doorway. She saw Connor make his coffee, set it on the counter, then step away to take a phone call. She saw Sawℹ enter with her own key, pull a small vial from her purse and add 3 drops to his mug. I stirred it, replaced it exactly where it had been. Victoria's blood turned to ice. She started documenting everything. The headaches Connor complained about, only after morning coffee. The dizzy spells, always within an hour of Sawℹ's visits. The bitter taste, he mentioned, that started 6 months ago, exactly when Sawℹ increased her morning appearances. Victoria managed to collect a sample from Connor's mug one morning, sending it to a private lab under a false name. The results came back 2 weeks later, chronic low-dose arsenic, carefully calibrated to cause symptoms that mimicked stress-related illness. She was holding those results, trying to figure out how to tell Connor that his oldest friend was slowly killing him, when she realized her period was late. The pregnancy test was positive. Suddenly everything changed. It wasn't just her life at risk anymore. She wrote Connor a letter explaining everything, the poisoning, the evidence, her pregnancy. She sent it certified mail to his office, marked personal and confidential. Sawℹ signed for it, filed it away, deleted the delivery notification from Connor's email. Victoria tried calling. Her calls went to voicemail, then started going directly to a message saying the number was disconnected, though Connor's phone worked fine for everyone else. She tried visiting his office. Security suddenly didn't recognize her and said she wasn't on any approved visitor lists. She realized then that Sawℹ had complete control of Connor's communications, his access, his reality. And if Sawℹ discovered Victoria was pregnant with Connor's child, they would both become problems to be eliminated. So Victoria disappeared. She withdrew her savings, left her apartment, and moved to Harbour's Rest, a small community in our north where she'd spent summers as a child in foster care. She cut her hair, changed her appearance, and waited for her daughter to be born. Royal Rhodes came into the world on a rainy Tuesday morning, small but healthy, with her father's nose and her mother's determination. The nurse asked about the father for the birth certificate. Unknown, Victoria said, though it shattered her heart. She thought about Connor every day. Wondered if he hated her for leaving. Wondered if Sawℹ had increased the dosage. I wondered if he was even still alive. Then, 13 days after Royal's birth, her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Rhodes, this is Detective Morrison. I'm investigating some unusual financial patterns related to Drake Industries. Your name appeared in some deleted communications. Can we talk? About what? About why someone's been systematically isolating Connor Drake from anyone who might notice he's being poisoned. Victoria's breath caught. You know about the poisoning. We suspect, but we need proof, and we need someone willing to testify about what they witnessed. I have proof. Lab results, samples, documentation. Then we need to move carefully. The person we suspect has significant resources and no hesitation about eliminating threats. We're going to send her a rumor that you've been spreading lies about Drake, trying to extort money. We'll make sure it reaches Drake himself. You want to use me as bait. We want to force a confrontation that we can control. Get Drake to you, make the suspect think their plan worked, then move in with evidence before they can act. Victoria looked at Royal, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. Do it, she said. But you keep my daughter safe. We will. And Miss Rhodes? Drake deserves to know he has a daughter. He will, when it's safe. The detective's plan worked perfectly. The rumor reached Sawℹ, who immediately told Connor, inflaming his anger with carefully chosen words. Connor stormed to Harbour's Rest exactly as predicted, furious and ready for confrontation. What Sawℹ didn't know was that their entire conversation was being recorded. Detective Morrison was 3 apartments away with a tactical team. That the lab results Victoria had been gathering for months were already being processed as evidence. All they needed now was 3 more days. 3 days for the investigation to close around Sawℹ like a trap. 3 days for Connor to process the truth about his daughter. 3 days for Victoria to hope that love could survive secrets, even necessary ones. Connor Drake stood in the cereal aisle of Harbour's Rest grocery at 6:30 in the morning, holding a handwritten list that wasn't his, and trying to decipher Victoria's hurried scrawl. Diapers, formula, coffee, eggs, bread, and at the bottom, added almost as an afterthought, patience. He stared at that last word for a long moment. You couldn't buy patience at a grocery store, but Victoria had written it anyway. A reminder to herself, maybe, or a message to the universe, or perhaps she knew somehow that he'd be the one holding this list, 3 days after their staged fight, trying to help in the only way she'd currently allow. You lost, honey. An elderly woman with silver curls peered up at him over her reading glasses. I'm trying to find patience, Connor said without thinking, then realized how that sounded. She laughed, a warm sound that filled the quiet aisle. Aren't we all? But if you mean the baby stuff, that's aisle 3. New parent? Brand new, he admitted. It shows. You're holding that list like it's written in a foreign language. Word of advice? Expensive diapers aren't always better. And that baby's mama probably needs about 6 more things she didn't write down because she's too tired to remember. Connor ended up with 3 bags instead of 1, including prenatal vitamins, the good chocolate Victoria pretended she didn't love, and 4 different types of baby wipes because he couldn't decide which were best. The cashier, a teenager with purple-streaked hair, didn't even blink at the billionaire using cash at dawn in their small grocery store. Harbour's Rest had apparently decided to protect Victoria's privacy through collective discretion. He knocked softly on Victoria's apartment door, aware that Royal might be sleeping. When Victoria opened it, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair in a messy bun, wearing the same Yale sweatshirt she'd had on yesterday. "I brought groceries," he said quietly, "and I was hoping I could help. Just practical things, dishes, laundry, whatever you need." "Connor, we agreed. We agreed I'd make a scene and leave angry. I did. We agreed to meet in 3 days at the park. We will. We didn't agree. I couldn't help with normal things in the meantime." She was too tired to argue. Royal had been up every 2 hours, and the exhaustion was bone deep. "Fine, but quietly. And if anyone asks you're the building maintenance guy in a $1,000 shirt, then you're really bad at your job." He started with the dishes, which should have been simple except he'd never actually loaded a dishwasher in his adult life. Victoria found him 10 minutes later, studying the machine like it was a complex merger agreement. "The plates face inward," she said, fighting a smile. "Cups on top, and that crystal baby bottle absolutely cannot go in there. Why make bottles out of something so fragile? It's not crystal, Connor. It's just clear plastic. Have you ever actually done dishes before?" "I have people for that." "Well, now you have people who need you to learn." By the time Royal woke for her next feeding, Connor had successfully loaded and started the dishwasher, though Victoria had to stop him from using dish soap instead of detergent. She sat in the rocking chair to nurse, and he busied himself making oatmeal, remembering she'd lived on it during their Tuesday night diner conversations. "Too much cinnamon," she said after the first bite, trying to be diplomatic. He tried again. "Now there's no cinnamon at all." 3rd time's the charm? It was. And sitting at her small kitchen table, eating oatmeal he'd made with his own hands, while she held their daughter, felt more real than any boardroom victory ever had. "I can stay tonight," he offered. "Take the night shift so you can sleep. You don't know how to take care of a baby, so teach me. I'm a quick study." She was too exhausted to refuse. That evening, she showed him how to change a diaper, how to warm a bottle, and how to hold Royal when she was fussy. At 2 in the morning, Victoria woke not to Royal's cries, but to soft singing. She crept to the doorway and found Connor in the rocking chair, Royal against his chest, singing something that sounded suspiciously like a quarterly earnings report set to the tune of a lullaby. "Revenue projections for 3rd quarter are strong," he crooned softly, "with growth in emerging markets up 15% year over year." Royal was fast asleep, one tiny hand fisted in his shirt. "You're singing her financial reports," Victoria whispered. "It's working, isn't it? Besides, she should understand compound interest before she can walk." The next morning brought the Harbour's Rest community out in force. Myrtle Hargrove arrived first, carrying a casserole dish and narrowing her eyes at Connor. "You're back. I'm fixing things," he said carefully. "You better be. That girl deserves better than another man who makes promises he won't keep." "Yes, Ma'am." Myrtle studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Casserole needs 40 minutes at 350. Don't let it burn." Coral Whitaker from 2 doors down brought lemon bars and didn't mention that she'd noticed Connor's car in the visitor space for 18 hours straight. Juniper Vale, who ran the flower shop on the corner, offered to adjust Victoria's freelance hours once she was ready to work again, carefully not asking about the father's situation. The peace lasted until noon, when Connor spotted a glint of light from the building across the street. A camera lens, telephoto from the look of it. The press had found them. His first instinct was to call his security team, have them handle it with their usual aggressive efficiency. Instead, he called Elias Navarro, his driver who'd grown up in Harbor's Rest. "Elias, there's a photographer across the street. How would someone from the neighborhood handle this?" "Well, sir, we wouldn't start with lawyers and threats, that's for sure. Maybe start with Sheriff Delaney? He's reasonable, knows everyone. Might make their job harder without making enemies." Connor walked to the sheriff's station 2 blocks over, feeling oddly exposed without his usual entourage. Sheriff Hank Delaney was in his 60s, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen everything at least twice. "Mr. Drake, heard you were in town. There's a photographer outside Victoria's building, the one pretending to be a tourist. I noticed him this morning. Not illegal to take pictures from a public street, unfortunately. I know. I'm not asking you to arrest him. I'm asking, what would you suggest?" Hank leaned back in his chair, surprised. "You're asking my opinion? Not ordering me to make him disappear? I'm trying to handle things differently." "Well then, maybe we could have some conveniently timed construction on that street. Water main work very loud. Might be the coffee shop could forget to have their Wi-Fi working when strangers come in. Parking might become scarce around there, and walking distances become inconvenient. That would be helpful. Might also help if you gave Elise Park an exclusive. She's been calling, real polite-like. I have known her since she was in Pigtails. She writes fair, doesn't sensationalize. One controlled story might keep the wolves away." Connor's phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the voice immediately. "Mr. Drake? This is Elise Park from the Harbor Gazette. I was hoping we could talk about your presence in Harbor's Rest. Off the record, if you prefer." He looked at Sheriff Delaney, who nodded encouragingly. "Miss Park, I appreciate you calling rather than ambushing. What would it take for you to hold the story for a few days? An exclusive when you're ready to talk. And the truth, not some PR spin. You'll get both. But right now, a young mother needs privacy and rest. Can you respect that?" There was a pause. "My mother had me at 19. I remember how hard those first months were. You have my word, nothing runs until you're ready." "But Mr. Drake, that photographer isn't the only one who's noticed you're here. You might want to move quicker on whatever you're planning." After she hung up, Connor realized something had shifted. For the first time in his adult life, he'd asked for help instead of demanding it. He'd negotiated instead of commanded. And it worked. He walked back to Victoria's apartment, where she was standing at the window watching the photographer pack up his equipment as construction vehicles arrived on the street below. "You didn't send lawyers," she observed. "I asked the sheriff for advice, made a deal with a local reporter, requested help instead of requiring it. Who are you, and what have you done with Connor Drake?" He looked at Royal sleeping in her bassinet, then at Victoria, still wearing his t-shirt from last night because she hadn't had time to do laundry. "I'm learning to be the man you both deserve. Turns out that means doing dishes badly and signing financial reports at 2 a.m. and asking for help when I need it. It's a good look on you," she said softly. "Exhaustion and baby spit up? Humanity." That night, as Connor walked the floor with Royal for the 4th time, he thought about power and how he'd always wielded it like a weapon. But here, in this small apartment with a woman who'd walked away from his money and a baby who didn't care about his net worth, he was learning a different kind of strength, the kind that asked instead of demanded, that served instead of controlled. Royal gurgled against his shoulder, and he adjusted his hold, careful and conscious of her fragility. "Your mama wrote patience on a grocery list," he whispered to her. "I think she meant it for me." Juniper Vale stood at Victoria's door, holding a box of forgotten mail and a knowing expression. The flower shop owner had been collecting Victoria's redirected post for weeks, a favor that hadn't been discussed but simply understood in the way Harbour's Rest handled its own. "This came back yesterday," Juniper said, pulling out a cream envelope from the stack. "Return to sender," marked refused. "But here's the interesting part. It was sent to Drake Industries 4 months ago, certified mail." Connor, who'd been warming a bottle in the kitchen, went completely still. Victoria took the envelope with trembling fingers. Her own handwriting stared back at her, along with the red stamp. "Delivery refused. Return to sender." "I never refused this," Connor said, crossing the room in 3 strides. "I never even saw it." "I know," Victoria said quietly, "but someone at your office did. Someone with the authority to sign for your certified mail." Juniper, sensing the weight of the moment, excused herself with a gentle pat on Victoria's shoulder. When the door closed, Connor took the envelope, studying the postmark. June 15th, the day Victoria had heard Royal's heartbeat for the first time. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the sealed envelope. Victoria nodded. Inside was a photograph, an ultrasound image, and a single page covered in Victoria's careful handwriting. Connor read it once, twice, then had to sit down heavily on the couch. "You tried to tell me about the baby," he said, his voice rough. "You sent it certified to make sure I received it." Sable signed for it. Victoria pointed to the delivery confirmation attached to the envelope. Her signature, clear as day, then marked it, refused, and sent it back. Connor pulled out his phone, his fingers moving across the screen with cold precision. He accessed Drake Industries' internal mail logs, something he rarely bothered with but had full clearance to review. There it was, June 15th, certified mail received, signed by S. Minton, marked as personal, inappropriate, returned per security protocol. "She never even told me it arrived," he said, scrolling through more logs. "Christ, Victoria, there are 17 email filters she created. Anything from your email addresses went straight to A, folder marked security threats under review. 43 phone calls logged and marked resolved without escalation. There's more," Victoria said quietly. "Check your calendar for the week after I left." Connor switched to his calendar app, going back to those dates. Every evening from 6 p.m. onward was blocked out. Medical appointments, confidential or strategic planning, do not disturb. The blocks were created by S. Minton, with a note per discussion, ensuring rest during investigation stress. "I never discussed this with her. I was trying to reach you those evenings. I thought you weren't answering. I wasn't getting the calls. And you were apparently in medical appointments that didn't exist." Connor stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Royal stirred in her bassinet, making small sounds, and he automatically moved to pick her up, the motion already becoming natural. Holding his daughter seemed to calm something in him, transforming anger into something colder, more focused. "I need to go to the office," he said. "Will you be okay for a few hours?" "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done months ago. Set boundaries. Make consequences clear. Sable Minton works for me, not the other way around." "Connor, be careful. If she's capable of this, she's capable of thinking she knows better than everyone else. She's capable of playing God with other people's lives. But she's not capable of stopping me from reclaiming control of my own life. Not anymore." He transferred Royal carefully back to her bassinet, then cupped Victoria's face gently in his hands. "I'll be back by lunch. Lock the door. Don't answer for anyone you don't know." Drake Industries occupied 40 floors of prime Manhattan real estate, but Connor bypassed his executive floor entirely, heading instead to information systems. The tech team straightened nervously as their CEO appeared unannounced. "I need a full audit of my personal communication filters for the past 6 months," he said to the department head. "Every email diverted, every call blocked, every message filtered, and I need to know who authorized each action." "Sir, that's going to show." It's going to show exactly what I expect it to show. Do it anyway. Have the report on my desk in an hour. He took the elevator to the executive floor, where Sawℹ Minton was already at her desk despite the early hour. She looked up with her practiced smile, the one that had fooled him for so long into thinking she cared about his well-being, rather than her own vision of what his life should be. "Connor, you look tired. The investigation stress is still—" "Conference room. Now." Her smile faltered slightly, but she followed him into the glass-walled room. Connor deliberately left the door open, no closed-door meetings that could be misconstrued or mysteriously forgotten. "Explain this," he said, placing the returned envelope on the table between them. Sawℹ glanced at it, and for just a moment something flickered across her face. Not guilt, but irritation at being caught. That was a security decision. During the investigation, all suspicious personal correspondence, a certified letter from a woman I was in a relationship with, is not suspicious correspondence. It's personal mail that you had no right to intercept. I had every right. You gave me power of attorney for corporate matters. Corporate, not personal, never personal. His voice was deadly quiet now. You signed a letter telling me I was going to be a father and sent it back. You deleted messages from the mother of my child. You blocked her calls while telling me she'd abandoned me. She had abandoned you. I was protecting. You were controlling. There's a difference. The audit report appeared on his tablet, delivered electronically by the efficient IT team. He scrolled through it, his jaw tightening with each entry. 57 intercepted communications, 23 calendar blocks that I never authorized. And these medical appointments, what exactly was I supposedly being treated for? Sawℹ lifted her chin. You were showing signs of stress, the headaches, the fatigue. I was ensuring you got proper rest by isolating me from someone I cared about, by removing a distraction during a critical time. Connor studied her for a long moment. This woman who'd been part of his life since they were children, who'd stepped in after his father's death, who'd guided him through the early years of running the company. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing him as a person and started seeing him as a project to manage. Effective immediately, your access to my personal communications is revoked, he said. You will handle corporate legal matters only. Any personal correspondence comes directly to me or my new personal assistant, who you will not supervise, contact, or advise. Connor, you're being emotional. I'm being a father, and a man who's finally understanding the difference between protection and control. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. I'm also instituting a new protocol. This phone number, he showed her the screen, is my direct personal line. It bypasses all corporate filters. Only 5 people will have it. You're not one of them. After everything I've done for you, you've done a lot for Drake Industries, and you've been well compensated for it. But you've also done tremendous damage to my personal life, and that stops now. You need me. I need an attorney who understands boundaries. Can you be that person, or do I need to find someone who can? Her face flushed. You wouldn't dare fire me. The board will support any decision I make regarding my personal staff. But I'm not firing you, Sawℹ. I'm restricting your access to appropriate professional boundaries. How you handle that restriction will determine whether you remain with the company. His phone rang. The regular line. He glanced at it. Elise Park again. Answer it, Sawℹ said. Tell her no comment. Threaten legal action if she publishes anything. Connor answered the phone, putting it on speaker. Miss Park. Mr. Drake, I'm calling as a courtesy. We've received some interesting tips about your presence in Harbor's Rest. I wanted to give you a chance to comment before we go to print. Sawℹ started to speak, but Connor held up a hand, silencing her. Miss Park, I appreciate your courtesy. I'm not prepared to comment on personal matters at this time. I would ask, not demand, but ask, that you consider the impact your story might have on people who didn't choose to be public figures. You mean the baby? Connor didn't flinch. I mean anyone who might be affected by premature speculation. That's not a denial. It's not anything except a request for time and space to handle personal matters. Privately, there was a pause. I'll hold the story for 72 hours. But Mr. Drake, others won't be so patient. You might want to consider getting ahead of this. Thank you for your patience. He hung up and looked at Sawℹ. No threats, no legal action, just a polite request that was honored. She'll burn you in 72 hours. Maybe. Or maybe she'll write a fair story about a man trying to do the right thing. Either way, it won't be because I tried to control the narrative through force. He stood to leave, then turned back. The supplements you've been giving me for my headaches. What's in them? I'm having them tested. If I find anything that shouldn't be there, we'll be having a very different conversation. He left her sitting in the conference room, her carefully constructed world of control crumbling around her. On his way out, he stopped by his new assistant's desk, a young man named Marcus who'd been hired just that morning on an urgent recommendation from HR. Marcus, I need you to set up a new email account. Personal, encrypted, and Sawℹ Minton is never to have access. Also, I need a toxicology lab that can test supplements discreetly. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes. If a woman named Victoria Rhodes ever calls, no matter what I'm doing, you put her through immediately. Back in Harbour's Rest, Connor found Victoria feeding Royal, the afternoon light streaming through the windows. She looked up when he entered, reading his face. How did it go? I didn't fire her, but I set boundaries, clear ones. Why not fire her? Because that would be using power like a weapon. Instead, I gave her the chance to choose, accept the boundaries or leave. The choice matters. What would you do in Connor's place? Fire Sawℹ Minton on the spot, or retrain and restrict access? Comment fire or reform, and tell us why. Victoria shifted Royal to her shoulder, patting her back gently. You've changed. I'm trying to. For her, he gestured to Royal. For you, for myself, honestly. The Connor Drake I met 9 months ago would have destroyed Sawℹ completely. The Connor Drake you met 9 months ago didn't understand the difference between power and strength. Power destroys. Strength rebuilds. And which one are you choosing? He sat beside them, his hand finding Royal's tiny back, feeling the rapid beat of her heart against his palm. The one that gets to be her father. The doorbell rang just as Victoria finished changing what felt like the 100th diaper of the week. She wasn't expecting anyone. And Connor had gone to handle an emergency board meeting. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and practical clothes, holding a medical bag. Victoria? I'm Tamsin Ortega, the postpartum nurse. Connor Drake hired me to check on you and Royal. Victoria's first instinct was anger, Connor making decisions without consulting her. But when she opened the door, Tamsin's first words dissolved the frustration. Before you get mad at him for overstepping, he called me 3 times to make sure you'd be okay with this. He said, and I quote, I want to help but not control, so please only come if she agrees when you get there. So, do you agree? Because honestly, honey, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Victoria started crying. Not gentle tears, but the exhausted, overwhelmed sobs of a new mother running on fumes. Tamsin stepped inside without invitation, gently guided Victoria to the couch, and simply sat with her. That's normal, Tamsin said quietly. Day 7 is often when it hits. The adrenaline wears off, the sleep deprivation accumulates, and your body is still recovering from something enormous. When did you last eat something that wasn't grabbed while standing? Tuesday. Right. First things first. Tamsin moved to the kitchen with practiced efficiency, returning with a glass of water and an apple sliced into manageable pieces. Eat. Drink. Then we'll check on the baby, and I'll show you some tricks that might buy you an extra hour of sleep. By the time Connor returned 2 hours later, Tamsin had transformed the living room into an impromptu swaddle clinic. Victoria was practicing on a stuffed bear while Royal slept in the bassinet, properly swaddled for the first time. "The triangle fold is key," Tamsin was explaining. "Too loose and they break free. Too tight and they can't breathe properly. You want a baby burrito, not a baby straitjacket." Connor stood in the doorway, watching Victoria laugh. Actually laugh, for the first time since he'd returned to her life. "Mr. Drake," Tamsin said without looking up. "Perfect timing. You need to learn this too. I thought. You thought you'd hire help and step back. No. Both parents need to know these things. Sit." He sat. For the next hour, Tamsin taught them both how to swaddle, how to recognize different cries, how to check for dehydration, fever, proper latch during feeding. She normalized everything they were feeling, the exhaustion, the fear, the overwhelming love mixed with moments of complete panic. "You're both doing better than you think," she said as she packed up. "But Victoria, you need to let him help. And Connor, you need to ask before you act." Every time, after Tamsin left, they sat in the quiet apartment, Royal still sleeping peacefully in her proper swaddle. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for Tamsin, for asking first, for learning the swaddle instead of just hiring someone to do it." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I need help without control, support without management. I need you to be present without taking over. Can you be more specific? I'm trying to unlearn 34 years of corporate leadership. I need clear parameters." She almost smiled at that. "Ask before you act, every time. If Royal needs something, ask if you can help. Don't just do it. If you think I need something, don't insist. And when I say no, accept it without trying to fix it. What if you're too tired to make good decisions? Then I'll be tired and make bad decisions, and they'll be mine to make." Connor opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "Okay. Okay? Just like that? You said help without control. That means accepting your choices even when I think they're wrong. So, okay, I need you to repeat back what you heard, not what you think I meant, what you actually heard." He took a breath. "I heard that you need me to ask permission before acting, to offer help but accept refusal, to be present without managing, to support your decisions even when I disagree. Yes, that's going to be incredibly difficult for me. I know I'm going to fail sometimes. I know that too." Royal stirred, making the small sounds that preceded crying. Without thinking, Connor started to stand, then caught himself. "Can I try settling her? Or would you prefer to?" Victoria blinked, surprised. "You can try." He lifted Royal carefully, remembering Tamsin's instructions about supporting her head and neck. The baby fussed for a moment, then settled against his chest, soothed by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The fever started at midnight. Just 100.1, barely qualifying as a fever for a newborn, but enough to terrify both parents. Connor wanted to rush to the emergency room immediately. Victoria wanted to call Tamsin first. "Can we compromise?" Connor asked, physically restraining himself from bundling them all into the car. "Call the pediatrician's emergency line while I get the car ready, just in case." Dr. Lila Bennett's voice was calm and measured through the phone speaker. 100.1 is concerning but not emergency level yet. Strip her down to just a diaper, keep her room cool, and check her temperature every 30 minutes. If it goes above 100.4 or she shows signs of lethargy or difficulty breathing, then you head to the ER. What signs specifically? Connor had a notepad out, taking detailed notes. Unusual sleepiness, and I mean unusual for Royal specifically. You know her patterns better than anyone. Breathing that seems labored, skin that looks mottled or blue-tinged. Trust your instincts. You'll know if something's really wrong. They spent the night in shifts, checking Royal's temperature religiously. Connor set up a spreadsheet on his laptop, tracking the readings with timestamps. Victoria would have mocked him for it if it wasn't keeping him calm and focused. At 3:47 a.m., the fever broke. Royal's skin went from warm to normal, her breathing evening out into the peaceful rhythm of deep sleep. Both parents nearly collapsed with relief. "You stayed calm," Victoria observed, exhausted but impressed. "The Connor I knew before would have had 17 specialists here and a medical helicopter on standby." "I wanted all those things," he admitted, "but you needed me to be steady, not reactive, so I wrote spreadsheets instead of making panic calls. Thank you for that. Thank you for trusting me to stay." Connor's phone had been buzzing all morning with increasingly urgent messages. Finally, he stepped into the hall to take a call from his CFO. "The board is insisting you attend the quarterly retreat." Harrison's voice was apologetic but firm. "It's tomorrow through Sunday. Major shareholders will be there. Your absence would be noticed." Connor looked through the doorway at Victoria, who was nursing Royal while trying to eat a sandwich one-handed. 3 days ago, he would have just agreed, made arrangements, assumed she'd understand. Now, he knew better. "I need to call you back," he told Harrison. He went back inside, waited until Victoria had finished nursing and gotten Royal settled, then sat down across from her. "The board wants me at the quarterly retreat. It's important. Major shareholders, strategic planning for the next fiscal year. It starts tomorrow, runs through Sunday." "So go," Victoria said, though something shuddered in her expression. "I'm not just going. I'm discussing it with you first. What would work for you?" She looked surprised. "You're asking?" "You asked before acting. This affects both of you, so I'm asking, when would you need to leave?" "If I negotiate, I could probably leave tomorrow afternoon, arrive for the evening session. Skip golf and networking, just attend the critical meetings. I could be back Saturday night instead of Sunday afternoon." "And if I said I needed you here, then I'd tell them I have a family emergency." "Which wouldn't be a lie." Victoria studied his face, looking for the catch, the manipulation. She found none. "Go tomorrow afternoon. Come back Saturday night, but stay reachable. And if something happens with Royal, I'll leave immediately. No questions, no complaints." "You promise?" "I promise." Connor kept his promise. He left at 3 p.m. on Friday, after helping with the lunch feeding and ensuring Victoria had everything she needed. He texted every few hours, not checking up but checking in. "How are you both? Not is everything okay?" During the board dinner, while other executives networked aggressively, Connor stepped out to take Victoria's call. Royal had been fussy all afternoon, and Victoria just needed to hear an adult voice. "Tell me about the meeting," she said. "I need boring corporate details to keep me awake." So he did, turning quarterly projections into a bedtime story of sorts, his voice steady and familiar through the phone while she walked the floors with their daughter. Saturday morning, he attended the critical strategy session, made his presentation, then politely declined the afternoon golf tournament. "Gentlemen, I have a family commitment that requires my attention." "Since when do you have family commitments?" Board member Richard Blackstone's tone was snide. "Since I became a father 11 days ago." The room went silent. Connor didn't elaborate, didn't explain, didn't apologize. He simply gathered his materials and left, arriving back at Victoria's apartment by 6 p.m. as promised. He found them both asleep on the couch, Victoria holding Royal against her chest, both breathing in sync. Instead of waking them, he quietly began cleaning the apartment. Dishes, laundry, the endless accumulation of baby items that seemed to multiply spontaneously. When Victoria woke an hour later, she found him folding tiny onesies with the same focus he usually reserved for million-dollar contracts. You came back, she said softly. I promised. People promise a lot of things. I'm not a person. I'm Royal's father, and I'm trying to be someone worthy of her mother's trust. It's not about grand gestures, Connor. It's about this, showing up, following through, doing the boring parts without being asked. No, but the fact that you asked instead of assuming means everything. That night, they developed a rhythm. Connor handled the midnight feeding, so Victoria could sleep 4 straight hours. She took the 3 a.m. shift while he rested. During the 6 a.m. feeding, they sat together, both exhausted but present, watching the sunrise paint Harbour's Rest in shades of gold and pink. This is hard, Connor said quietly. The hardest thing I've ever done, Victoria agreed, but also the most important. Royal finished her bottle and looked up at them with those dark blue eyes that were already starting to show flecks of Connor's brown. She didn't care about billion-dollar deals or corporate retreats or the complicated history between her parents. She just needed them to be present, consistent, and willing to learn. We're doing okay, Victoria said, and it wasn't a question. We're doing okay, Connor agreed. The next morning brought a text from Sable Minton. I've decided to resign, effective immediately. You were right about boundaries. I hope you find happiness with your family. Connor showed the message to Victoria. She's gone. How do you feel about that? Relieved, sad, but mostly free to be who? He looked at Royal, who was awake and alert, studying his face with the intense focus that newborns sometimes displayed. Free to be her father, without anyone else's agenda getting in the way. Victoria reached over and took his hand. That's all she needs. That's all any of us need. The tabloid headline appeared on newsstands across the city. Billionaire's secret love child, exclusive photos inside. Connor saw it first when he stopped for coffee, his face draining of color as he stared at the grainy long-distance photo of him holding Royal through Victoria's window. He bought every copy from the stand, all 7 of them, a futile gesture that would have been laughable if it wasn't so desperate. That won't stop people from seeing it, the vendor said, not unkindly. I know, but maybe it stops 7 people from spreading it. By the time he reached Victoria's apartment, his phone had 17 missed calls from various news outlets. The building's front entrance had 3 photographers camped outside, telephoto lenses ready. Sheriff Hank Delaney was already there, his patrol car blocking the building's driveway. Mr. Drake, Hank said evenly, these gentlemen are legally allowed to be on public property, but they're not allowed to block pedestrian access, harass residents, or trespass on private property. We've made that very clear. One of the photographers lowered his camera. Sheriff, we're just doing our jobs, and I'm doing mine, which includes enforcing loitering laws and noise ordinances. Now, you can stay on that public sidewalk as long as you're not blocking foot traffic, but the minute someone complains they can't get through, I'm citing every one of you. Understood? The photographers grumbled but stepped back, creating a narrow pathway. Connor nodded his thanks and slipped inside. Victoria had already seen the headline. She was sitting on the couch, Royal in her arms, the newspaper on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. They got her face, she said quietly. It's blurry, but it's her face. She's 13 days old, and she's already tabloid fodder. Connor felt rage rising in his chest, the old instinct to destroy, to use his power like a hammer. He wanted to call his lawyers, threaten lawsuits, buy the tabloid and shut it down. Instead, he took a breath and sat down beside her. What do you need from me right now? I need to know this isn't just interesting to you because it's new. I need to know you're not going to get bored when the reality sets in that this is every day for the next 18 years. I'm not going anywhere. People say that. Your father probably said that to your mother. The words hit like a physical blow. Connor went very still. Tell me about your father, Victoria said, her voice softer now. The real story, not the sanitized version for business profiles. Connor looked at Royal, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos swirling around her existence. When he spoke, his voice was raw. My father was brilliant and distant. He loved the idea of family but not the daily work of it. When I was 12, he took me to the office on a Saturday, said he had just one meeting and we'd go to the park after. The meeting ran long, then another meeting, then an emergency call. We never made it to the park. That's not the end of the story. No, he had a heart attack in the car on the way home. I was sitting next to him when it happened, watching him clutch his chest, not understanding what was wrong. The last thing he said to me was, "Sorry about the park, kiddo, next weekend for sure." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Connor. There was no next weekend, and I spent 22 years telling myself his way was the right way. Work first, always work first, because you never know how much time you have. But I was wrong. He was wrong. You don't make the most of limited time by choosing work over people. You make the most of it by being present for the moments that matter. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and resent us for what you gave up. I'm scared I'll mess this up so badly that you won't let me try again. He turned to face her fully. But I'm more scared of Royal being 12 years old, sitting next to me in some boardroom, waiting for a meeting to end so we can finally spend time together. I refuse to be my father. Words are easy, Connor. Follow through is hard. Then let me prove it, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, with boring daily consistency. Victoria shifted Royal to one arm and reached for her laptop with the other. Then we need to write it down, all of it. A real agreement about how we do this. A co-parenting contract. A covenant. Something we both commit to, with clear expectations and consequences. They spent the next 3 hours crafting it together, Royal sleeping between them as they negotiated the terms of their daughter's future. Between Connor Drake and Victoria Rhodes, for the benefit of Royal Rhodes. Connor typed while Victoria dictated, their voices finding rhythm as they built something neither had experienced growing up, a framework for consistent, present parenting. Time commitments, Victoria said. You take 3 overnight shifts per week, non-negotiable. If work emergencies come up, you communicate immediately, not after the fact. Connor added it to the document. Agreed. And you agree to tell me when you need help before you're at breaking point, not after. Medical appointments. We both attend unless explicitly discussed otherwise. No sending assistants or nannies to important checkups. Financial support is provided monthly, with full transparency. You have equal say in how it's spent, and I don't use money as leverage in disagreements. Privacy protection, Victoria continued. We agree on what information is public and what stays private. Royal's face, her school, her location, those stay private until she's old enough to consent. Decision-making on major issues, education, religion, medical care, requires both parents' agreement. If we disagree, we seek mediation, not lawyers. They kept going, building clause by clause. Support is offered, not forced. Do you need help? Not, here's what I'm doing. Disagreements are handled privately, never in front of the Royal. New partners are introduced only after serious commitment, and only with the other parent's input on timing. Neither parent speaks negatively about the other to the Royal. Both parents maintain consistent schedules. Royal knows when to expect each parent. Failure to follow through has real consequences, outlined and agreed upon. What consequences? Connor asked. If you miss 3 scheduled nights in a row without a valid emergency, you lose decision-making input for 1 month. If I refuse reasonable help requests 3 times, same thing. That's harsh. That's accountability. We're not building this on trust alone. We're building it on verifiable actions. Connor saved the document, then read through it completely. It was practical, unglamorous, and more meaningful than any romantic declaration. I want to add one more thing, he said, a review clause. Every 6 months we sit down and assess whether this is working. We adjust what isn't. We commit to honesty over comfort. Agreed. They both signed it digitally, then printed 2 copies, one for each of them, kept somewhere safe and referenced often. This doesn't solve the press problem, Victoria said, looking at the newspaper again. No, but I know what won't solve it. Strong-arming editors, buying silence or hiding. Those are temporary fixes that create bigger problems. His phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the voice immediately. Mr. Drake, this is Detective Morrison. We need to move faster than planned. Sawℹ Minton has been asking questions about your whereabouts. She knows you're in Harbour's Rest. Connor put the phone on speaker so Victoria could hear. What does that mean for us? It means she's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also take bigger risks. We need to accelerate the timeline. How? We're going to arrest her tomorrow morning, but we need you both to testify about what you witnessed. Are you prepared for that? Victoria looked at Royal, then at Connor. What about our safety? We'll have protection, full detail until this is resolved. But Miss Rhodes, your testimony about witnessing the poisoning is crucial. Without it, we only have circumstantial evidence. She'll do it, Connor said. I'll speak for myself, Victoria said firmly. Yes, I'll testify. But I want guarantees about the royal safety. You have them. We move tomorrow at dawn. After the detective hung up, they sat in silence for a long moment. Tomorrow it's over, Victoria said. The legal part, maybe, but not us. Not this. He gestured between them, then at Royal. What is this, Connor? What are we doing here? We're being parents. We're building something that works. We're choosing each other every day instead of just once. That's not a relationship. That's a partnership. Maybe that's better. Maybe that's more honest. Victoria stood and walked to the window, watching the photographers still camped outside. I need to know something. When this is over, when Sawℹ is arrested and the press moves on to the next story, what happens to us? What do you want to happen? I want to know that you're here because you choose to be, not because you feel obligated. I want to know that if we try this, really try, and it doesn't work, we can still be good parents together. Connor joined her at the window. I can't promise we'll work as a couple. I can promise I'll never stop trying to be the father Royal deserves. And I can promise that whatever happens between us, I'll never use her as a weapon or a bargaining chip. That's all I need to know. That evening, they put Royal to bed together, both aware it might be their last quiet night for a while. Tomorrow would bring arrests, testimony, and media attention. But tonight, they had this. A baby sleeping peacefully, 2 people learning to trust each other, and a covenant that promised consistency over passion. Are you scared? Victoria asked as they watched Royal sleep. Terrified, Connor admitted, but not tomorrow. I'm scared of being the kind of father who promises to be present and then finds excuses not to be. Then don't be that father. Is it that simple? It's that hard. Every single day, you choose to show up or you choose not to. There's no middle ground with children. Connor looked at their covenant, printed and signed, sitting on the kitchen counter next to Royal's feeding schedule. No middle ground, he repeated. Both feet in or nothing. Both feet in, Victoria agreed. Outside, the photographers waited for their story. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other, lost each other, and found each other again, prepared to face whatever came next. Together. The morning arrived with clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Harbour's Rest had been preparing for the park reopening for months, a community project funded by anonymous donations that everyone suspected came from Drake Industries, though Connor had never confirmed it. Victoria stood near the platform, Royal strapped to her chest in a carrier, watching the town gather. Families spread blankets on the newly planted grass. Children tested the playground equipment while parents hovered nervously. The air smelled of fresh mulch, hot dogs from the vendor carts, and possibility. Myrtle Hargrove had set up a first aid station near the pavilion, a folding table with bandages, antiseptic, and ice packs, prepared for the inevitable scraped knees and bumped heads that came with excited children and new playground equipment. Her years as a retired school nurse made her the unofficial community medic. "Are you ready for this?" Connor asked quietly, appearing beside Victoria. He dressed down, jeans, a simple button-down shirt, no tie. He could have been any father at the park, except for the way people's eyes tracked him, curious and speculative. "The question is, are you ready?" Victoria countered. "Half the town is here, the press is here, this is your first real public appearance as Royal's father." "I'm not making an appearance. I'm attending a park opening with my daughter and her mother. The tabloids won't see it that way. I don't care what the tabloids see." Mayor Patricia Williams took the podium, her voice warm through the microphone. "Welcome, everyone, to the reopening of Harbour's Rest Community Park. This space has been part of our town for 60 years, and thanks to generous community support, it'll serve our children and grandchildren for 60 more. She went on to thank the various contributors, carefully avoiding naming Connor directly, but acknowledging Friends of Harbour's Rest, who believe in investing in community spaces. "And now, I'd like to invite Victoria Rhodes, whose reef restoration proposal inspired much of the park's sustainable design, to cut the ribbon and officially open our park." Victoria looked startled. "I didn't know I was—" "Go," Connor said softly, gently touching her elbow. "I've got a royal—" She unstrapped the carrier, transferring their daughter to Connor's arms with the practiced ease that came from 2 weeks of constant co-parenting. Royal settled against his chest, a tiny hand gripping his shirt. Victoria walked to the platform, accepted the ceremonial scissors, and cut the red ribbon to genuine applause. As it fell away, children rushed toward the playground, their joy uncontained and beautiful. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, immediately tripped on the new rubber surface and started crying. Before his embarrassed mother could reach him, Myrtle was there with a bandage and a lollipop. "You're the first official injury of the new park," she told him solemnly. "That makes you special. We'll put your name on the first aid log." The boy stopped crying, suddenly proud instead of hurt. Connor watched the scene with Royal still secure in his arms, swaying slightly in the unconscious motion all new parents develop. He didn't notice Elise Park approaching until she was right beside him. "Mr. Drake," she said pleasantly, her phone's voice recorder clearly visible in her hand. "Beautiful day for a park opening. Care to comment on your presence here?" Connor looked at her, then at the recorder, then smiled, genuine and relaxed. "No comment. That's it? No statement about your daughter, your relationship with Miss Rhodes, your future plans. That's it." He shifted Royal slightly, his hand protective on her back. "I'm here as a father enjoying a park opening. That's not news. Everything you do is news, Mr. Drake. Then I'm choosing to be boring news." He nodded politely. "Enjoy the park, Miss Park." She studied him for a moment, then smiled back and put away her recorder. "Off the record? That's exactly the right answer." Across the park, several other reporters lowered their cameras without taking photos of Royal's face. The message had been received. Connor Drake wasn't performing for the press. He was simply present. An hour later, as families settled into picnics and the playground filled with happy chaos, Connor received a text notification. It was from Detective Morrison. "Sable Minton arrested this morning. Charges filed. You're both safe now." Connor showed the message to Victoria when she returned from helping set up the community garden section of the park, her hands dirty and her face flushed with happiness. "It's over," she said, reading the text. "The legal part is over. The rest is just beginning." She looked younger, lighter, more like the woman he'd first met at the fundraiser. "Come with me," she said, taking his free hand. "There's something I want to show you." She led him to a newly planted maple tree, barely taller than he was, with a small plaque at its base in honor of new beginnings and second chances. "The town council planted it this morning," she explained. "They didn't say it was for us specifically, but it is." Connor shifted Royal to one arm and pulled out his phone with the other, opening their co-parenting covenant document. "I want to add something. Right now, while we're standing here, what? A new clause. Number 14. We will be honest first, even when inconvenient, especially when inconvenient." Victoria took his phone, read the addition, then typed it in herself. Agreed. They stood in silence for a moment, Royal breathing softly between them, the sounds of the park washing over them. Children laughing, parents chatting, a community being a community. "Can I ask you something?" Connor said carefully. "About Royal's name. Yes, you gave her Rhodes instead of mine. I understand why at the time, but now. Would you consider a hyphenation? Royal Rhodes Drake, or is that me overstepping?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching the families around them. A father pushed his daughter on a swing. A mother helped her son navigate the climbing structure. Ordinary moments of parenting, unremarkable and essential. "I want to keep it Rhodes for now," she said finally. "Not because I don't trust you, but because I need to know that this," she gestured between them, "isn't about claims or ownership. It's about showing up." "I understand. Do you? Because I'm asking you to let your daughter carry another name while you prove you deserve to be her father. That's not easy for someone like you. Someone like me. Someone used branding, legacy, names on buildings. Royal Rhodes is my way of saying she doesn't belong to anyone. She just is." Connor looked down at his daughter, at the tiny face that would someday ask about her name, her identity, her place in the world. "You're sure?" "Victoria, I have my name on 43 buildings across 6 countries. None of them matter as much as being the man she calls when she's scared, or sick, or needs help with homework. That's the only name that matters. Dad." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You've really changed. I'm trying to. Every day, in small ways." A photographer from one of the tabloids had found them, telephoto lenses aimed from across the park. Connor noticed, and his first instinct was still anger, still the urge to shut it down. Instead, he simply turned his back, shielding Royal with his body, and kept talking to Victoria like nothing had happened. "That was very deliberately not a reaction," she observed. "I'm learning that some battles aren't worth fighting. He'll get a picture of my back." Not exactly exciting content. The old Connor would have had security remove him. The old Connor was exhausting. This version is much calmer. Royal woke then, making the small grunting sounds that meant she'd be hungry soon. Without discussion, Victoria and Connor moved toward the quieter section of the park, finding a bench under another young tree. Victoria settled in to nurse, while Connor created a privacy shield with his body and a light blanket, casual and protective. To anyone watching, they looked like any family at the park, tired, happy, together. "This is enough," Victoria said softly, watching the royal nurse. "This moment, right here, this is everything." "It is," Connor agreed. "No contracts, no negotiations, no grand gestures. Just us, being present." Across the park, Myrtle Hargrove watched them with satisfaction. She'd seen Connor Drake storm into Victoria's apartment 2 weeks ago, fury and confusion written all over him. Now she saw a man holding a blanket for privacy, letting his daughter carry another name, choosing quiet presence over public performance. "That one might actually make it," she said to Coral Whitaker, who'd brought more lemon bars to share. "Think they'll get married?" Coral asked. "Don't know. Don't care. Marriage isn't the only measure of commitment. Showing up every day, that's the real vow." As the afternoon stretched into evening, families began packing up. Connor helped break down tables, carried trash to bins, did the ordinary work of the community without making it remarkable. When Elise Park passed him on her way out, she paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Drake, you passed what? The test. The town was watching to see if you'd show off or show up. You showed up. That was never in question. It was for everyone who'd seen you before. The old you would have made a speech, written a check, made sure everyone knew who paid for the park. The old me was an idiot." She laughed. "The new you is better. Royal's lucky." After she left, Connor looked at Victoria. "Did I just pass a test I didn't know I was taking? What's my score?" She smiled, adjusting Royal in her arms. "Passing. Barely. But I'm improving daily." As they walked back toward Victoria's apartment, the sun setting behind them, Connor thought about the man he'd been 2 weeks ago, the one who measured worth in market share and buildings bearing his name. That man would have seen this day as beneath him, a waste of valuable time. This man, walking beside the mother of his child with grass stains on his shoes and baby drool on his shoulder, knew better. This was the only moment that mattered. The 2 a.m. feeding had become Connor's favorite time, though he'd never admit it in a board meeting. The world was quiet, reduced to just him and Royal in the soft glow of the nightlight, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb while she drank her bottle with single-minded determination. "You eat like you're negotiating a merger," he whispered to her. "All business, no small talk." Royal's eyes drifted closed, then opened again, fighting sleep the way she always did. So much like him it was almost frightening. Victoria appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the robe he'd bought her last week, soft cotton, nothing fancy, chosen because she'd mentioned her old one was falling apart. "You're supposed to be sleeping," Connor said softly. "So are you. It's my night for the 2 a.m. shift. I couldn't sleep. Figured I'd handle it." She settled onto the couch beside him, her head finding his shoulder with the ease of repetition. 3 weeks of this rhythm had created an intimacy that felt more profound than their passionate beginning ever had. "You did dishes before bed," she observed, "and folded the laundry. The dryer buzzed, and you were already asleep. You're showing off. I'm showing up. There's a difference." Royal finished her bottle, and Connor lifted her to his shoulder for burping, the motion automatic now. 2 gentle pats, a pause, then the small burp that meant success. "She's getting bigger," Victoria said, running her finger along Royal's tiny arm. 4 weeks old tomorrow. Tamsin says she's gained exactly the right amount of weight. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, Harbour's Rest slept. Inside, a family existed in the small hours, held together by choice and consistency. The next morning brought Tamsin Ortega's final scheduled visit. She examined Royal with practiced efficiency, checked Victoria's recovery progress, then sat back with satisfaction. "You're both doing remarkably well," she announced. "Royal's thriving, Victoria's healing perfectly, and Connor—" She fixed him with a knowing look. "You've learned to swaddle without creating a baby straitjacket. I'm impressed." "Does this mean we graduate?" Victoria asked. "It means you don't need me anymore. You've got this. But I'm always a phone call away if questions come up." After Tamsin left, Connor made breakfast, scrambled eggs that were only slightly rubbery, toast that was almost perfectly golden. Victoria had stopped critiquing his cooking, recognizing that imperfect food made with care tasted better than catered perfection. "The bookstore?" Juniper mentioned they're having a children's section expansion. "I thought we could look at books for the Royal. She's 4 weeks old. She can't read, but we can read to her." Tamsin said it's good for development. Victoria smiled into her coffee. "Who are you and what have you done with Connor Drake?" "He's learning that children's books are an acceptable use of Saturday afternoons." "The bookstore," Harbour's Rest books and coffee, smelled like old paper and fresh espresso. Connor pushed Royal's stroller while Victoria browsed, pulling books from shelves with the delight of someone who'd grown up with library cards instead of trust funds. This one, she held up a worn copy of a classic children's book. My foster mother read this to me when I was 6. It's about a tree that gives everything to a boy as he grows up. Connor took it, reading the back cover. It sounds sad. It's beautiful. It's about unconditional love. Then we'll get it. He added 3 more to the growing stack. Books about the moon, about kindness, about being brave when you're small. That evening, they passed Coral Whitaker's apartment and found her on her small balcony, a fresh batch of lemon bars cooling on the railing. "Coral," Victoria called up. "Those look amazing." "Take a box," Coral called back. "I made too many again." Connor climbed the stairs and returned with a still warm box plus a small bag. She also included a new recipe she wants you to try, something about rosemary shortbread. "She's teaching you to bake? She's teaching me that community means accepting help as much as giving it." They ate lemon bars for dinner, sitting on Victoria's small balcony with Royal between them in her bassinet, watching Harbour's Rest prepare for evening. Lights flickered on in windows. A couple walked their dog. Someone's music drifted through open windows, jazz, warm and alive. "Dr. Bennett called today," Victoria said. "Royal's 1-month checkup is Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'll be there. You have that board meeting. I'll reschedule it. Pediatrician appointments are non-negotiable per our covenant, remember? You actually remember all 14 clauses? I read it every morning while my coffee brews." Later that week, they managed their first real date night in. Royal was asleep, actually genuinely asleep, and they had maybe 2 hours before the next feeding. Connor made grilled cheese sandwiches while Victoria opened a bottle of wine. "Fancy," she teased, taking in the paper plates and mismatched mugs. "I'm a catch. Grilled cheese and cheap wine. What more could you want?" "Nothing," she said, and meant it. They ate on the couch, shoulders touching, talking about nothing important. He told her about the new sustainability initiative at Drake Industries. She shared her ideas for expanding the coastal restoration project. Neither checked their phones, neither rushed the moment. "Who takes the 2 a.m. shift tonight?" Connor asked, finishing his sandwich. "I'll flip you for it. That's not in the covenant. We should add a clause about creative conflict resolution. Clause 15. When both parents want the same shift because they've realized it's actually peaceful and lovely, they take turns deciding without coin flips." "That's too specific." "Then you write it." She pulled out her phone, opened their shared document, and added, "Clause 15. Scheduling conflicts are resolved through honest conversation and occasional rock, paper, scissors." "Rock, paper, scissors?" Connor read over her shoulder. "It's more dignified than fighting." He kissed her forehead, gentle and unhurried. Not a prelude to anything, just an expression of affection that didn't demand response. "Best 2 out of 3, he offered. "You're on." She won. He took the 2 a.m. shift anyway because he could see she was exhausted. She didn't argue because she trusted him to mean it when he said he wanted to help. Letter to Royal, written by Connor Drake. "My dearest Royal, you're 4 weeks old today, and you've already taught me more about being human than 34 years of corporate success ever could. Your mother and I weren't a traditional love story. We didn't have a fairy tale beginning or a guaranteed happy ending. What we had was messier, harder, and more real than any story someone could write. I want you to know that the best thing your mother ever did was walk away from me when I wasn't worthy of her. She chose her dignity over my money, her truth over my comfort. That decision, terrifying as it must have been, protected both of you. The best thing I ever did was learn to ask instead of demand, to show up instead of show off. to measure my worth by the daily grind of diaper changes and 2 a.m. feedings rather than quarterly earnings. Here's what I hope you learn from our story. Love isn't loud. It's not grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's your mother teaching me to fold onesies properly. It's me learning which burp cloth is the good one. It's both of us exhausted at 3 a.m., but taking turns anyway because we promised we would. Repair doesn't happen in one big apology. It happens in 1,000 small actions repeated until they become patterns. I can tell you I'm sorry for missing the first 13 days of your life, but the real apology is showing up every day after. Intimacy grows in the ordinary. The most romantic thing your mother and I do isn't fancy dates or passionate declarations. It's washing bottles together in comfortable silence. It's knowing how the other takes their coffee. It's trusting each other with our most vulnerable selves, tired, unwashed, overwhelmed, and trying our best. Tell the truth early because later is dangerous. Your mother tried to tell me about you, and someone decided later was better. Later almost never. The truth, even difficult truth, especially difficult truth, deserves to be said immediately. Forgiveness is a practice, not an event. Your mother hasn't forgiven me for not being there at the beginning, but every day she practices forgiveness by letting me try again. That's how trust rebuilds. One day, one choice, one kept promise at a time. You carry your mother's chosen name, Rhodes, and that's perfect. It reminds me every day that you're not my possession or my legacy. You're your own person, and my job is to deserve the privilege of being your father. Love, Dad. The most powerful expressions of love aren't expensive gifts or dramatic gestures. They're showing up for the 2 a.m. feeding, learning to fold laundry, asking how can I help, instead of assuming you know best. Saying I'm sorry is the beginning, not the end. Real repair requires doing better, consistently, until patterns replace promises. Deep connection doesn't require candlelit dinners and romantic getaways. It's built in shared midnight feedings, collaborative dish duty, and trusting someone with your exhausted, imperfect self. Waiting for the right time to share difficult truths often means the right time never comes. Honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, deserves immediacy. Which lesson hit you hardest today? Comment below and tell us which of these 5 lessons resonated with your own life. Subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more powerful, moral-rich narratives that explore what it really means to love, lead, and live with integrity. And please share this video with one person who needs a hopeful second chance story. Someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose better, do better, and become the person the people you love deserve. Royal stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds that would soon become a cry for feeding. Connor's eyes opened immediately, muscle memory already responding. He carefully extracted himself from the couch without waking Victoria, lifted his daughter with practiced care, and moved to the kitchen to warm a bottle. "Hey there, Royal Rhodes," he whispered, settling into the rocking chair. "Let me tell you about the day your mum and I chose boring, beautiful consistency over every other option." Royal looked up at him with eyes that were starting to focus, starting to recognize, starting to trust. And Connor Drake, Billionaire CEO, recognized that this moment, 4 a.m. on a random Thursday with spit up on his shirt and exhaustion in his bones, was the most successful thing he'd ever done.